The Velvet Court of Luminaris was not built for human nerves. Its ceiling glittered with strands of light like spun silk, and each time the crown of crystal above the throne pulsed, the entire court bowed. I bowed too, trying not to notice that I was the only one who didn't know how deep the bow should go. On the throne reclined Princess Kitsara, the Vulpine sovereign in waiting, radiant in every sense. Her fur shimmered like molten sunset, orange edged in darker russet, and her golden eyes had the sharpness of coins fresh from the mint. Her ears twitched with precise annoyance, and her tail, fluffy, massive, ribboned with gold thread, moved lazily across the throne's arm as if it were a second scepter. "Envoy Mason Hale of Earth," the seneschal announced, "you have made an unusual claim. State it for the record." I cleared my throat, which echoed far too loudly in the chamber. "For the record, humans do not require a mating season. We are, fertile year-round. No cycles. No restrictions." The court rippled. Fans snapped open, claws tapped on marble, whispers broke like waves. Kitsara leaned forward. Her voice was velvet wrapped around steel. "You claim your species is always ready?" "Always," I said, forcing a smile. "Some days more than others." The princess's ears swiveled in curiosity, her expression unreadable but her tail betraying an amused flick. A biological excess or a biological weapon? One of the scholars barked, preposterous, impossible. No higher species would waste energy in such reckless fashion. I raised an eyebrow. "You've never been to Earth on a Friday night?" The chamber erupted. Gasps, titters, scandalized murmurs. Kitsara hid her smile behind a delicate clawed hand. "High matron law," said Scholar Maros, rising with a heavy staff, "is clear. Extraordinary claims demand observable proof." Kitsara's eyes gleamed like twin lanterns. "Then let us observe." The court chamber smelled of ink and citrus oils, but beneath it I caught the faintest wild scent from Kitsara herself, fox warmth, musk, and spice. It was unfair that biology could be more persuasive than my speech notes. Scholar Maros unfurled a scroll so large it required 3 scribes to carry it. "Article 12 of High Matron Law," he intoned, "requires a demonstration of biological continuity in cases of disputed claim." I frowned. "Demonstration?" The seneschal translated with relish. "Proof. Here. Before witnesses." Kitsara's golden gaze locked on me, her ears tilted forward, alert, intrigued, predatory. "A test of endurance, human. Will you submit?" The words hung in the chamber like baited hooks. I swallowed. "You mean right here?" "Yes," Kitsara said flatly, "though our scholars will ensure modesty of method." Her lips quirked. "Relatively." The tribunal stirred like a stirred anthill. Instruments were wheeled in, harps strung with crystal fibers, incense burners designed to track pheromone flux, and a chandelier of prisms that chimed whenever heart rates aligned. "Your Highness," I said, "this feels less like science and more like reality television." Kitsara bared a hint of fang. "You entered my court claiming endless readiness, Envoy. Surely you are not afraid to prove it." "Afraid?" I said, straightening my harness as if it were a tie. "Princess, I just don't know what to wear." The chandelier laughed in light. "Then wear your nerve," she murmured. Her tail curled behind her like a comet, and for a dizzy moment I believed I might actually enjoy this. The ceremonial chamber was round, intimate, and ringed by viewing galleries like a coliseum for gossip. Silk screens framed the center floor. Technicians fitted me with a harness of golden bands that read breath, pulse, and micro-motions. The thing hummed against my skin, mapping me like a living graph. Kitsara stood opposite, adjusting her own harness. On her, the gold traced across orange fur and the pale cream of her chest, accentuating lines she probably knew would scramble every data set. Her tail flicked irritably at the technicians. "It pinches," she complained. "Calibration requires compression," one explained. She sighed dramatically, then glanced at me. "Does your harness pinch too?" "A little," I admitted. "Though in my case, that might be the point. The chandelier chimed at our synchronized heart spikes. Scholars scribbled furiously. Article 12 conditions, Marrow said, forbid penetration, ritualistic ceremony, or obscenity. Proof shall be derived from secondary measures, proximity, arousal indices, scent flux, and endurance. I muttered. So basically, foreplay with an audience. Kitsara's ears perked. Foreplay? Trust me, I said. You'll like the concept. She bared her teeth in a grin sharp enough to be a threat or an I forced my gaze away from her tail. We start with words, confidence, humor, or sheer terror. And you. I swallowed. Right now, terror. But I'll try confidence. You have the kind of eyes that should come with a warning label. The chandelier chimed like champagne glasses. The court gasped. Kitsara tilted her head. And humor? I smiled. I once saw a dog chase its tail for hours. Right now, I understand him. Her laugh was velvet in teeth, and the scent of her fur hit me like spice on the tongue. Cycle 1 markers, Marrows croaked. Confirmed. Heightened chemistry readiness sustained. I leaned closer. We're just getting started. Rules forbade contact, which made not touching the hottest dare in the galaxy. She closed the distance until her whiskers nearly brushed my cheek. Describe what you want, she whispered. I fought to keep my voice steady, to tuck that ribbon back behind your ear, to run my hand down the line of your back until your tail shivers. 2. Enough, she cut in, cheeks darkening beneath the fur. Her pupils flared. The chandelier rang like wind chimes in a storm. Scholars scrawled, Subject demonstrates sustained control despite clear stimulus. Kitsara whispered, low enough only I could hear, You are dangerous. Only because you asked, I whispered back. Her claws flexed against the silk. Cycle 2, Maris announced shakily, sustained. A technician dimmed the silk screens to twilight, and a small glass lamp was set between us, its flame steady as breath. Kitsara tilted her ears. Name this? A boundary, I said. A promise. We call it a lantern. If either of us says it, we pause. Her whiskers lifted. Lantern, she tested. Vowels soft, tongue careful. A word that means we could, but we choose to wait. Exactly. We moved around the lamp like dancers, letting warmth paint our faces, letting breath sink. The chandelier answered in soft crystalline purrs. I hovered a hand near her waist, close enough to feel heat haloing fur, then retreated by a finger's width. Her tail went still, then swayed with maddening patience. Do you know, she murmured, what restraint looks like on Vulpine? This. She smiled, hungry and amused. Yes, and also this. She leaned until her lips were a syllable from my cheek. Lantern? I swallowed a laugh and relief in something greedier. Lantern? I echoed. In the gallery, a scribe fainted upright and continued writing as he slid down the rail. The doors hissed. A rival envoy barged in, all polished arrogance and borrowed outrage. Indecorous. The court is not a theater. Kitsara didn't turn her head. You will leave, Ambassador. He puffed. I will file an injunction. File it from the hall, I said, stepping between him and the lamp. We're in the middle of a peer-reviewed sigh. A ripple of scandalized delight swept the gallery. Guards glided forward. The envoy huffed out. Kitsara's eyes warmed. You stand between me and inconvenience. I specialize in that. She touched 2 fingers to her collarbone, the Vulpine sign for I see you. Then stand with me while the scholars debate the words to describe what they do not have names for. Up above, Maros cleared his throat, language finally catching up to chemistry. Cycle 3, sustained indices despite intrusion, readiness maintained. The hypothesis persists. I leaned closer to the princess's ear. They can call it whatever they like. We're busy making a lexicon. Vulpine intimacy has courtship built into scent and story. We traded both. She described the snow forests in her northern mountains, how brush fires ran like comets under the moon and the pack sang them to sleep. Her voice roughened on certain vowels. The harness registered it as a spike of something that made the chandelier shiver in sympathy. I told her about summer storms on a farmhouse porch. Fresh dirt, wet wood, the relief when lightning finally cracked the heat. The instruments painted our words as color, her story gold and ember, mine cobalt and green. Humans seduce with memory, she said softly. Because memory is already halfway to touch. Her tail brushed the floor like a punctuation mark. She wasn't ready to speak aloud. Cycle 4, Maros managed. Confirms sustained readiness through narrative stimuli. Translation, I murmured. We're very good at wanting with our mouths. Kitsara's ears flicked, delighted. Make that your ambassadorial motto. The rules forbade contact, so we rolled the edges like sugar on glass. Show me your control, she said, wicked and curious. I lifted a hand, palm open, and held it a breath from the cream fur at her throat. Heat licked my knuckles. The chandelier sang a tight, bright chord. Lantern, she said, pupils blown, smile feral. I want the asking more than the answer. A scholar in the gallery hissed, we need a new axis. Another scribbled, define. Ache as evidence. We both laughed, and the instruments mistook it for something else and sang. They called a recess. We were escorted to a balcony overlooking silk roads that flowed like starlight between bridges. Vendors sang, drifting gardens exhaled perfume. Kitsara rested her elbows on the rail, tail draping down like a comet tail banner. Are you playing a part, Envoy Hale? No. I found honesty easier than caution with her. I am edited by the room, but not pretending. You like me, she said as a fact. Terrifyingly. She looked sideways, ears softened by the admission. Most suitors are performances in expensive clothing. I wore a harness and a bad joke. Both flatter you. We shared the kind of silence that feels like a held hands, even when no hands touch. When the bell for resumption chimed, she straightened, official again, except for the way her tail brushed my ankle as we turned to go. The harness recorded it as an error and then an event. We requested movement. The technicians remarked the floor with soft points of light. We met in the center like magnets that had learned manners. Step, pivot, almost catch. She spun and the world brightened. I matched her weight with mine without closing distance. Name this, she said, breath even. Trust. Name this, as she swayed until my nose filled with fox sweet spice. Gravity. Name this, as she skimmed her breath along my cheek. Invitation, I whispered, meaning 100 other nouns. Up in the gallery, 2 perfumers cried into their sleeves and insisted it was pollen season. Maros announced the indexes with a voice that belonged in a confessional. The chandelier forgot what restraint meant and rang itself giddy. We ended chest to not quite chest, staring. Lantern? I asked, barely. Lantern, she said, and we both smiled at the ache of it. The court loves to mislabel what it cannot orchestrate. They tried to file our cycles under 8 archaic categories, none of which fit. Not ritual, Maros sighed. Not display. Not courting by contract. Not spectacle. Perhaps pedagogy, offered a young scholar, eyes dazed. Kitsara's ears twitched. Or perhaps a conversation. Conversations don't chart like this, another groaned, waving at graphs that looked suspiciously like slow-burning comets. I leaned into the mic they insisted I wear. Maybe your categories assume the point is a finish line. Ours assumes the point is the person. This time, it wasn't the chandelier that chimed. It was the throne room itself, a subtle pulse of the light crown, like a heartbeat of approval. Night fell. The court adjourned. The city exhaled. In a quiet room without galleries or graphs, we put the lamp on a low table and sat on the floor across from each other, knees almost brushing. We talked about unglamorous truths. What scares us, where we are proud and where ashamed. The foolish things we did when nobody was looking. At one point I reached, by reflex, to brush a stray ribbon from her ear. I caught myself, fingers trembling. Lantern, I said, breathless at my own restraint. Her tail curled around my ankle and squeezed once. Lantern, she answered proudly, as if the word itself were a kiss. We continued. The lamp burned steady. The chandelier in this room, very small, made contented glass sounds as if dreaming. The next day I brought a gift. A folder of old paper maps of Earth, creased and stained by travel. Desert routes glowing like copper wires, ocean depths shaded like bruised sapphires. Kitsara unfolded the one of mountain switchbacks and breathed it in as if scents were trapped in the paper. You carried these for years? She said. They carried me. She touched a corner with one careful claw. You mark your longing with lines, and you mark yours with songs. She cocked her head. Sing me one. I am not a singer, but I sang the porch storm hymn my grandmother used to hum. Nothing fancy, a handful of notes that think they are a home. Kitsara closed her eyes. When she opened them, the gold had gone molten. Cycle 6, Maros would later write, was recorded off session as a private exchange that nevertheless moved every needle in the room. Needles, yes. Instruments, yes. And also something that had nothing to do with measurement. Someone filed a complaint that our demonstration had turned the court into a cathedral to sensation. Indecorous, the words returned. Contagious? Kitsara read the charge and smirked. If a lantern is contagious, then by all means let it spread. I suggested a compromise. A guard in the back raised a paw. And if your heart is louder than your mouth, say lantern with your mouth, I said. Kitsara's tail thumped the floor once, pleased. This, she told the room, is the kind of contagion our archives can stand. We danced again, privately, just us and the lamp. Breath built until speech frayed. We leaned until the world narrowed to the soft brink where warmth becomes touch. Lantern, I said, because that was the agreement, and because the word tasted like care instead of denial. She didn't pull back. She smiled into the space between us. Lantern, she breathed, cheeks flushed beneath her fur, pupils deep night. I felt every inch of the kiss we did not take. The room felt it. The little chandelier sang a single, perfect tone, and then fell adorably silent, as if fainting from good manners. We laughed where other stories would have ended. Then we went on, inventing a longer ending. There was a day it rained. Not the perfumed mists of Luminaris, but a real storm dragged in by weather rights to clean the air. We stood on a covered bridge and watched the silk roads bead with liquid jewels. Your fur, I said, smells like cedar in storms. Her ears flattened in embarrassment. You smell like zizbread coming out of an oven. Is that good? It's unbearable. Our shoulders were a hair apart. The lamp was not here. The city was loud enough to be our cover. Lantern? I whispered anyway, trusting the word more than the noise. She breathed out a laugh like surrender. Lantern, and brushed her tail along the back of my calf in thanks, a touch so fleeting the rules blushed but did not break. Scholar Maros published early results grudgingly lyrical for a man built out of dust and footnotes. We tested for seasonality, he wrote, and found instead of vocabulary. We sought to chart arousal and accidentally mapped ethics. Readiness, in the human pattern, is not a storm that wrecks but a hearth that endures. Fed by choice, aired by humor, banked by the word that means wait. He did not name the lantern. The court did it for him. Overnight, the palace shop sold out of glass lamps. Someone put tiny ones on their collar. Someone else proposed a new court holiday. Kitsara rolled her eyes and bought 2 anyway. 1 for her room, 1 for mine. But when do I meet your mother? I asked, because I love poking gentle tigers. She will make you cook, Kitsara said solemnly. She will taste your food, insult it kindly, then feed you until you weep. I already wept at your descriptions of her stew. She will demand to know if you are honorable. I'll tell her about lanterns. She will say, words are wind. Then I'll wash dishes. Kitsara laughed with her whole body, fur rippling like a field. She will like you despite herself. And yours? I asked. You have met my mother, she said with mock tragedy. She is the court. It does not wash dishes, but it can be taught. The crown in the ceiling pulsed. The court reconvened. Maros lifted the red vellum. By witness and instrument, the collegium affirms, humans exhibit persistent reproductive readiness independent of seasonal cues, within frameworks of consent and social modulation that are unusually robust, and, to our bureaucratic despair, charismatic. A ripple of laughter, reluctant and genuine. Kitsara descended the steps. Her tail wrote a sentence in the air. Envoy Hale, she said softly, eyes bright. The court is satisfied. That makes 1 of us, I said under my breath, and her smile nearly undid me. She offered her hand, palm up. I hovered mine above it, breath a brushed feather. Lantern? I asked. Lantern, she agreed, then leaned close enough that only I heard her next words. Come bring your lamp to my rooms. There is so very much we can talk about. We left to the sound of a chandelier pretending not to chime. The doors closed. The lamp's flame, steady, stubborn, bright, waited on the table for us to begin again. By the week's end, the city had adopted our word. Lanterns glowed on balconies, on bridges, even in the paws of children playing chase. Couples whispered it to each other in markets. Guards used it to pause fights before they flared. Kitsara twitched her ears in bemusement. "We meant a boundary," she said. "They made it a festival." "That's humanity's specialty," I told her. "Turn a private word into a public holiday." We strolled the silk roads beneath banners shaped like foxtails in flame. Vendors sold candied fruits in paper lanterns. Someone sang a ballad about the human who wouldn't stop wanting. Kitsara tried to look scandalized, but her tale gave her away. "You realize," she murmured, "we can never explain to them what the lantern truly meant." Or, predictably, the tribunal tried once more to stamp their authority. "This court cannot sanction a contagion of desire disguised as cultural pedagogy," Maris thundered. Kitsara rose from her throne, fur gleaming like firelight. "You mistake the lesson. We proved endurance, yes. But what endured was not appetite. It was choice." I added, "If you can't measure that, it's because you built the wrong tools." Gasps. Scribbles. The chandelier above us rang like applause. Morrow sat, defeated but secretly enlightened. "Very well. The record will state, readiness perpetual, governed by consent, lantern as mechanism." It was the driest possible sentence, and yet, when the clerk read it aloud, the chamber exhaled as if something sacred had been secured. Kitsara leaned toward me, ears forward. "We won." I smiled. "No, we taught." That night, away from courts and chandeliers, we lit our own lamp. Its glow brushed orange into her fur and warm silver into my skin. No scholars, no instruments, no rules, but the ones we wrote. We sat closer than ever, knees touching, tales of conversation turning into hands of truth. "I thought this was science," she murmured, voice unsteady. "It was," I said, cupping the glow of the lamp between us. "Now it's ours." The flame trembled with the soft draft of our breathing. We leaned until silence itself seemed to sigh in relief. What happened next belongs to us, not to scrolls. The court will never have that data. And that is the best proof of all. Fade to black, fade to warmth, fade to something that felt like forever beginning. Weeks later, Maros released his final paper. "We classified humans as biologically excessive," he wrote, "but we were wrong. Excess suggests waste. Humanity's readiness is not excess but surplus. A hearth with too much firewood, enough to warm strangers and neighbors alike. Handle with care. Provide tea. Offer lamps. Do not interrupt." The treatise was copied, mocked, adored, and, most tellingly, used as a dating manual by half the palace staff. Kitsara read it aloud to me one evening, tail coiled around my leg. "He makes you sound almost noble," she teased. "Almost," I said, and kissed the crown of her head. On the night of my departure, the court held one last ceremony. Not pompous, not stiff, simply 100 lanterns lowered from the ceiling crown like falling stars. Each one flickered with the memory of a moment from our trial. Laughter, restraint, sparks, silence. Kitsara stood beside me, regal and unguarded at once. "You will return?" she asked, as though she didn't already know. "Every time a lamp is lit," I promised. The lantern swayed. The tribunal bowed. For once, the chandelier didn't chime. It glowed steady, content. Kitsara slipped her hand into mine. No pause, no word this time. The boundary had already served its purpose. And somewhere in the archive, a clerk wrote the final sentence. "Humanity is terrifying, beautiful, and, against all reason, romantic."